This is Reality Bytes, in association with Sovereign Independent UK and One World Chronicle.
Welcome to Reality Bytes Radio on the 24th of October 2013. We're going to have Thomas Sheridan come on in a minute. I've spoken to Thomas before on a couple of occasions, generally about his study of psychopathy, but he's been indulging himself in a bit of documentary filmmaking, and we're going to discuss his film, The End of an Era, EIRE, talking about Ireland. Just bear with me a second. I need to drag him into the call here. Just bear with us a second. Actually, perhaps we better go to a piece of music because I'm using an iPad tonight and it's a different kind of setup here. So if we can go to a piece of music, and I'll get Thomas into the call. Welcome back to Reality Bytes Radio. After a little technical hitch, my fault entirely. We've got Thomas Sheridan on the line. Are you there, Thomas?
I am indeed, Neil. Hi. Good to talk again.
Yeah. Great. I was saying before the break, we'd spoken a couple of times before about your study of psychopathy, and you basically said, at the time you needed to get away from it, and people needed to stop dealing with that kind of stuff because it gets quite depressing and quite, it kind of gets under your skin. And then you went off and made a documentary called The End of an Era. I'd recommend people to watch it. I mean, it's made in a kind of, I don't know how you describe it. It's just a kind of fly on the wall kind of. Frugal, yeah. Yeah, well, it's, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm Scottish. I mean, what's... do you want to explain why you went away from the psychopathy, and then a little bit about that movie, and then I know you want to talk about something you're doing in terms of research at the moment, and we can go into that.
Well, the thing with the psychopathy is I think I took it as far as I could take it, and there was nothing left, and there was no new real research coming in. So it kind of dried up in terms of the input that was coming in. And I didn't want to be one of these people who was constantly regurgitating the same thing over again for years to come, because I'm interested in lots of different things. And my initial and original idea was to put the whole idea and the whole concept of the study of psychopathy into the alternative media and into the alternative scene, because there was far too much nonsense being spewed around about, lizards and aliens and Anunnaki and all this stuff, and it was actually damaging the credibility I felt of the overall movement. However, I felt if the psychopathy thing was brought in there, it would be a silver bullet that was flawless and could be used against the establishment because it's their science being used against themselves. And I think I was fairly successful in that. I think a lot of people now are talking about psychopathology as part of the problem in the control structure, to a large degree. And I think I did the best job I could in getting that out there. And there was nothing left more for me to do it. Secondly, it was starting to annoy me in some ways and scare me in other ways, because I was starting to see witch hunts developing and stuff like that. And people were being very quick to call other people psychopaths based on the most trivial reasons, like, my husband left me, he's a psychopath, that kind of thing. And so I just decided to sort of tone that stuff down and hopefully try and get people thinking about psychopathy, not so much in the personal level, but mainly in how the world actually functions according to a psychopathic system. And I think I've done fairly well with that. I think I've got people at least talking about it and thinking about it. Now, I wanted to make a film for two reasons. One, I wanted to talk about the state of Ireland as it is in the last few years, how we've been sort of battered into submission. And secondly, I wanted some kind of film experience because I'm going to be working with an American professional director next year, an American guy who wants to make a film about me, take me around a few countries and just talk about the impact of basically pathology upon societies in different countries, and basically social engineering and things like that. So I needed to get that kind of experience because I had no broadcast experience. And so when this opportunity came along, I went for it. And I think I made my point and I got it out there. And, I said what I could say about how Ireland seems to me at this point in time. But it was also relevant to other countries because I wanted to talk about things like, how not to engage with the system, because there's never everyone talks about how to engage with the system, but I think when you engage with the system too much, you're basically giving your power away, and you're validating the power and the pathology of the state over you, where you basically ignore the state, pull away, adopt a more sort of an anarchy kind of viewpoint, where you and other people together can sort of like survive outside the system. It's far more effective than going down to government building and bashing drums and screaming and waving flags and saying, "Please, Mr. Government, protect us." So that was the idea behind the film.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, if everybody just walked away and said we don't need you anymore, then they're absolutely powerless to do anything, really. I'm in the process of moving house and trying to rent somewhere, and I stopped paying taxes a long time ago, and I don't have any debt. I don't use the bank account unless I absolutely have to, and it's incredible. You go to these letting agents and you say, "Look, I've got no debt. I've got cash. Can you rent me a house?" They say, "Oh no, we can't do that. We've got to do a credit check." I say, "Well, I don't have credit. How are you? What are you going to check?" And they can't deal with it. That's a simple example of a letting agent. They can't even deal with it if you're not on the database, as it were.
The whole thing is about keeping you in the system,
yeah.
Trapping you in it. And credit is the chains that the slaves had years ago, had manacles and chains around their necks. We have credit.
Yeah, and well, we pay for our own chains, as one of the well-known broadcasters says. Repeatedly, we pay for our own chains all the time. So I mean, just a little bit about the film. I know you mentioned it had relevance with other countries, and I've got a Greek friend of mine. I was down in Greece in August. I drove down there, and he was a hotelier. He got up at 6 o'clock in the morning. He did his breakfast in the hotel. He did the rooms. He did all that kind of stuff. He had 2 hours in the afternoon where he rested. He keeps bees as well, so he had to do some of that as well. And then he was working in a restaurant, another restaurant, not part of this hotel, until 2-3 in the morning. And he says, "All I'm doing is paying taxes." He says, "That's it. That's my life, paying taxes." And he said, "And everybody along this whole promenade is in the same position." He says, "And every month or 2 months in Greece they have a tax reassessment to see how much they need to raise it by." So people think they're getting ahead after a couple of months, and then they're hit with some more taxes and just keeps them down, But,
all to pay, and each country, both Greece, Ireland, and Portugal, are run by this IMF Troika, and these are the ones behind it. And ultimately, it's just about starving the country in order to finance the global capital system, bankers, and bail out the bondholders.
Yeah, absolutely. I've worked. Sorry, carry on.
Who are people like Bill Gates, believe it or not. That's who Irish, Greek, and Portuguese taxpayers are bailing out. Bill Gates and people like that.
Yeah, multi-billionaires. Yeah. I mean, I've not kept up to date with what's happening in Ireland. I mean, how bad is it now?
It's a funny situation right now. It's sort of like in limbo. I honestly can't say it's terrible, and I honestly can't say it's great. One thing I've definitely noticed is that the actual government has been using more of a hardline language and a hardline approach. It's been kind of I don't know, they're a bully boy kind of thing. They're constantly going on about they're going to crack down on welfare spongers and things like this. The reality is the biggest welfare spongers are the bankers who are being bailed out. There's a lot of this kind of like right-wing talk, and there's a lot of kind of political pandering. But I have to say, there's no great sense of doom or dread. It's a lot better off here than it definitely is in Greece and places like that. There's a lot of... See, the Irish are different than many other countries, than most other countries, in that when we have a problem, we all run off. So you'll always have that safety valve here of emigration. It's built into our culture. And even though it's not permanent emigration, people here won't... the governments and the system here is quite aware that young people here won't... they won't have a revolutionary mindset. They'll just say, "Oh, I'll go off to Australia for 4 or 5 years until the economy gets better," which has always been a traditional safety valve here. I honestly can't say that it's really bad. But then again, like yourself, I'm kind of out of the system, so I don't know. But there are taxes and things like that coming in, which was expected. But I personally have not seen anything to suggest there is a kind of a revolutionary undercurrent stirring. Certainly not in any kind of militant sense.
No, well, that's I mean, that's why they give us an election every 5 years to stop revolutions happening. I suppose you vote the present bunch of crooks out and hope the next bunch of crooks will do something better. Which just blind faith and ignorance. Really, it's just perpetuates the whole thing. If nobody turned out to vote, then it all goes down the pan, doesn't it? But
that's right. I believe nobody should vote. I think everyone should just get away from voting and stop it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a simple
feeding
solution.
that system. Stop feeding that system.
Yeah, put these guys on the dole queue. I mean, the Irish Independent today, the Irish Times in their health section, alcohol prices to be fixed depending on strength. That says it all, doesn't it, really?
Medication.
Yeah. Keep it flowing. Yeah, I mean, you were talking about the language in Ireland being more hardline against welfare scroungers and all this, but it's exactly the same over here. And over the past, I'd say probably 6 months or so at least, the attack on the elderly in Britain has just been intensifying, month on month. They were saying that last week they were going to withdraw their TV licences and their heating payments, their cold weather payments, if they didn't need it. Well, how do you know you need it until it's cold? The TV license costs, so what? But today they've got the elderly to blame for housing crisis. So they're blaming old people. It's not the immigrants; it's the old people that are forcing the government to build new houses. It's just
divide
ridiculous.
And conquer. Yeah, divide and conquer.
Yeah. So
did you hear the story today? It might actually segue into something we might talk about later. That the Irish government raided Roma gypsy camps to look for blonde-haired children. That was the new one.
Yeah, I saw something like that. Yeah.
It's just bizarre. I mean, and this is and then the kids that they actually seized from their parents, they did DNA testing on them and found that the Roma parents were actually natural parents. So it's like something out of Hitler's Germany or something.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a village or a small town in, I think is it Nepal, where the direct descendants of Alexander, apparently, and they still dress in the traditional Greek clothes and all the rest of it, and they're blonde-haired, blue-eyed, and all the rest of it. I mean, what difference does that make? I had ginger hair when I was young. That means I must be Iranian or Persian. Because that's apparently where the red hair gene comes from. So maybe
it serves as an example of the social services are obsessed with sort of control, and they can have carte blanche to do anything they want, no matter how stupid or racist, and get away with it. Where it was you or I who actually singled out a Roma or any other group, we'd be done for racism.
Oh, absolutely. But we're doing something else over here with the community press group. I've talked about it quite a bit on here, and we're actually taking criminal prosecutions against these kind of characters, these social workers and all the rest of it, for stuff they're doing which is clearly criminal. And we had a little bit of sex in the court yesterday with somebody's maybe one step closer to getting their child back. But either way, whether this person gets the child back or not, there's been criminality on the part of the social services, and one way or another, they're going to be held to account for it. So that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing. So I mean,
social services is a perfect job for a psychopath when you think about it.
Well, they can't have any empathy, can they?
And you can play God. You can enter people's homes, dust them out, see what's in there you can take. Elderly services as well is filled with psychopaths. Elderly social services, they go over there and rub the whole people blind.
Yeah, well, we've also got footage of a case where a child was taken at 7 hours old from a mother. She'd had a natural birth at home. There were midwife's doctor there. Everything was fine. And the reason they took this child, they say, is because the mother had been sexually abused as a child.
Oh my God!
That's the only reason. And 32 police officers turned up with a mental health unit, and some of those police officers on horseback to deal with this.
Well, I've been saying for a while that the only people who'll never have their children seized from them is Jerry and Kate McCann.
Well, exactly. Yeah. We can go into that if you want. I spoke to Chris Spivey briefly on here a couple of weeks ago. We were up in Fraserburgh, it was about an hour north of Aberdeen, and he's got a lot of stuff on his site regarding the planned excavation of a a patch of ground in the car park of a gentleman's house who was a suspect at one time, but he's been, cleared completely at this stage. And that's supposedly being negotiated over the last couple of weeks, and I don't know when it's going to go ahead or not. But that's never appeared in any of the mainstream media. But on the same day that all that was getting announced, we have all this hoo-ha about Madeleine McCann again in the mainstream media, and they're following new leads and all the rest of it. Yeah, and again today, there's the Portuguese are opening a new lead apparently.
Did you see how that was spun today? It was spun today. It's almost like every press release goes through the McCann's PR team, and then they redraft it to make it look like the Portuguese are guilty.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean,
it's incredible, it's staggering.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if the Portuguese police are at fault, then what about the people that have done some investigating, like independently? And there's the evidence, and how about looking at that? But nobody pays the blindest bit of attention. It's always, as you say, it's got to go through the channels, the official authorised channels, if you like, for this information to come out. Instead of, I mean, if that was you or I with a child, I mean, you'd still be distraught. You would still be, you'd be chasing every lead you could to find out one way or another whether your child was dead or alive. I mean, you would.
My suspicions are, something happened to that child, and chances are the child died there that night. But apart from everything else, I believe there was another person who may have been involved in that group, that what they call the Tapas group, who was probably a British politician, who has since probably been, or previously or since been connected to some other shady dealings. And perhaps the whole thing is designed under the Official Secrets Act and diplomatic immunity to protect this politician. I really do feel that we haven't been told of all the people who were there that night.
No, I think it was supposedly, was it 9 families or something, was it?
Yeah, and the Portuguese police immediately, constantly said from the very get-go that there was an instant, political and diplomatic atmosphere surrounding the whole case. Now, there's one thing that was been reported by the Portuguese police that I picked up on back in the day when the story first broke, and it has not been spoken about much. When the initial 2 cops arrived at the apartment, they thought Jerry McCann was a Muslim, because he was holding his arms towards them, extended, with the back of his hands facing towards them, and they assumed that he was doing the Muslim call of prayer. Now, I have a few articles saved of the Portuguese initial police saying this. That's also the Freemasonic sign of distress. It actually means, is there no help for the widow's son? And it's you give it to the cops when you're in trouble, and the cops will help you rather than do the investigation. And that's been completely ignored. And to me, that's maybe a very significant aspect in all this, that there's some kind of Freemasonic network that these initial Portuguese police didn't know about, that seized the investigation in order, again, probably to protect a politician that we don't know about.
Yeah, I was speaking to a colleague of mine the other day there, and he was talking about the pupils in people's eyes, and how trauma in the body manifests itself in the pupil. I mean, I don't know much about it. I don't know if you've heard anything about that.
Yeah.
But the kind of teardrop that's in the right eye of Madeleine McCann.
Columba, it's called, yeah.
He believes, rightly or wrongly, that that's related to pelvic trauma.
Well, there was one character there, I think his name is Payne, and a Portuguese couple reported that he made some pretty sickening gestures at the dinner table concerning Madeleine McCann. I don't know if you know about this, but they both gave a police statement that he did. He mentioned Madeleine McCann's name and then put his finger into his mouth saying she likes this, while Jerry McCann laughed. Now, this is just somebody's statement, but it was given to the police. Also, there was an Irish family on holiday there who claimed they saw Jerry McCann running with the body down the street. They are literally living in fear for their lives and are basically become recluses.
Yeah, well, as you say, there's a lot more to this case than meets the eye. And I don't think we'll ever get to the truth, really. But
no.
The more,
I believe the child is dead. I believe the child died that night.
Well, I do as well. I've no doubt about it, really.
Tragically.
Yeah, and the truth will never come out, I don't think. we'll go to another piece of music, and then we'll have a chat off air and see where we go next. I don't know what Paul is going to put on next. What we have, I've got some Kelly joke for you later. Welcome back to Reality Bytes Radio with our guest Thomas Sheridan over in Ireland. We're going to talk about Jimmy Savile in a little while. Thomas has been doing a lot of research on the whole issue surrounding him and who was involved in it. But there's a couple of newspaper articles today that we wanted to go over. Well, I've got one here in particular. Have you heard of the organisation called Femen? These are the women that...
A radical feminist group?
Yeah, from Ukraine. Yeah. Well, they're now opening a branch in the UK. So, and this is in the Independent today. So, they're saying that British women have joined their army. But they've got the picture on here with the naked women. But of course, they're all good-looking women. You know, you don't see any.
Yeah, it's big style.
yeah. And I wonder. They've got this one's got Femen written across her body, but you can't see the F. You know, it could just as easily be semen.
You know that flying saucer cult, the Raelians? They always have beautiful, good-looking young women prancing around naked to try and get recruits. It reminds me of the same tactic.
Yeah. Oh, there's never there's never any ugly people involved in any of this stuff, or ordinary people. You know, I mean, they're all and they're writing all over the bodies. They look like something out of a porn movie. I mean, if that's feminism, then what are women thinking of? It's just obscene, really. And if people,
feminism was created by the CIA. Gloria Steinem, in her autobiography, openly states that she got a grant from the CIA to actually start Ms. Magazine.
Yeah,
and she was a spy in college, spying on communist students.
Yeah, and the Rockefeller Foundation did a lot of funding for it as well. But yeah, I just think it's bizarre. I mean, what's happened to women that they think this is okay? You know, what's been done to them?
You're breaking up there, but I don't think it represents, the thought of even moderate feminists. I don't think feminism actually represents anyone else except a sort of an agenda that's coming from outside it. I don't believe feminism is actually part of the women's rights movement or anything like that anymore. If it ever was, I think it actually works to forward globalist agendas. I think we've gone off there, damn it.
No, we're here.
I'm still there.
Yeah.
I think it's gone off. I think it's gone off to more to sort of radicalize feminism towards cultural change in the material world. That kind of idea. And a part of that, the old divide and conquer turned men against men and women, or turned men against women, women against men. But also with these female things and these ultra-radical feminists that turn women against women. So there can't even be a cohesive movement within the woman's movement. So you can't have a situation. The idea is to marginalize and radicalize anyone in the movement. So if you don't have a radical opinion within feminism, you're marginalized out of it. At the same time, if you're a radical inside, they're pushing all agendas forward, which are often given to you from outside.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there will be women here who will join this thing, and I'm sure they'll be well paid to do it as well. But anyway, moving on. Angela Merkel is nearly in tears in this picture on I think it's Independent. She's condemning the US spying on everybody as if Germany isn't doing it either. It's just.
I'm sorry, Neil, I can't hear you at all.
Okay, is that better?
The quality's terrible. It keeps breaking up.
Okay.
It must be on your end because he's coming in pretty good. You want to hang up and recall Thomas?
Yeah.
I can. You can hear me, but I can't. Every second syllable is broken up, Neil.
Oh, okay.
Want to go to a song and do a recall? Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, welcome back to Reality Bytes again. I'm getting a bit of deja vu from a couple of weeks ago when we had Chris Spivey on, and we tried to mention certain people and certain names, but we'll see what happens this part of the broadcast. We were talking off the break when we finally got reconnected again to Thomas, and I think we're all agreed, myself, Thomas, and the producer, that certain keywords seem to set Skype off, or somebody at the other end of Skype, and they don't like it. But as I was saying off air, the more of the spooks, we shall call them, that listen, the better they might actually, start doing their jobs and prevent us having to do it for them. And
develop a conscience.
And we could actually take some time off and do what we're supposed to be doing, enjoying time with our families. But instead of doing this rubbish. But anyway, we'll go on to Mr. Saville and see if we get cut off. You've done the psychopathy, you've done the documentary, and now you're researching aspects of the Saville case, or the entire Saville case. I'm not entirely sure. From what perspective did you start going into that?
Well, before I start talking about that, I want to say whenever I talk about Saville on any show, it's cut off, damaged, wrecked. He is almost like he still exists or something in the electromagnetic spectrum. Either as moles or spooks wrecking the broadcast, or maybe he actually haunts it. I know that sounds silly, but it's bizarre. It's absolutely creepy. Now, Saville. Okay, why did I take an interest in Saville? Well, one, when I was a kid, I never liked him. I couldn't understand his fame. I couldn't understand anything about him. He had the creep factor, even though he was a big star. But I recently, all the revelations came out. It didn't surprise me. But about 6 months ago, one of my favorite journalists, when we used to have journalism, proper investigative journalism, David Yallop, he wrote books like Beyond Reasonable Doubt and In God's Name, about the propaganda thing in the Vatican in the late 70s. He has a book about the Yorkshire Ripper called Deliver Us from Evil. And at the same time I was reading about Sutcliffe, a photograph of Saville and Sutcliffe in Broadmoor Prison came out. And apparently Saville and Sutcliffe were close friends while Sutcliffe, the so-called Yorkshire Ripper, was in prison. So that just seemed strange to me. So I went back through Yallop's book, which is a very comprehensive documentation of the murders, and I started to plot where was Jimmy Saville on the night. And then the Daily Mail revealed what I already knew, that one of the bodies was found basically in Saville's backyard in Leeds by his apartment building. Following the original police investigation of witness investigation, I believe that Irene Richardson, the young lady who was killed that night in the park behind Saville's apartment, was actually murdered by Sutcliffe and Saville together. I believe that Jimmy Saville was much worse than a paedophile. I actually believe he was a serial killer, and his inspiration was Moira Hindley of the Moors murderers. He dyed his hair blonde and made himself even look like her. Now, Saville had been setting off alarm bells for me for years, but the famous Louis Theroux documentary, the one that did it to me, when they visited his apartment in Leeds, he showed Louis Theroux around the apartment, and he showed the bed, and he called it his altar. And Theroux even said, "What did they do on altars, Jimmy? They sacrifice people." Jimmy Saville was involved in some of the Ripper killings, I think at least 2 of them, maybe more. He may have been present for a few more than that. That's why he was a suspect at the time, and that's why the police investigation, the South Yorkshire and West Yorkshire police, deliberately threw that entire investigation into chaos, because they believed too that Saville was the prime suspect. This allowed Sutcliffe to go on a killing spree when he should have been caught several times before. Their focus was on destroying the investigation, creating a climate of fear in order to keep Saville, who was travelling between the Preston and Leeds, on what I call the 666 corridor. The M6, the M61 and the M62, where all the murders took place on a corridor between that. Now, recently it's come out in the last few days that Saville has now been a suspect locally in Hebden Bridge in Yorkshire, a place I actually come to know fairly well. I've actually been speaking there a few times. After a young girl back there in the 1990s was found dumped in a canal, Saville, the multi-millionaire, was living like a serial killer drifter in the area out of a caravan and was seen walking around the woods late at night. As well as his, we're talking about like a guy. This would be like, put this in American context. Could you imagine if Johnny Carson was living in a caravan in a remote part of the United States where young girls were going missing and he was seen wandering around the woods at night? We are dealing with the Saville case with something that is so dark, so big, so enormous, that if we do not lose focus of this and really keep pushing it, it can become the greatest tool for waking up the masses and can be the stone that we can finally pull out of a pyramid that can bring the whole deck of cards and house of cards come crumbling down. And this is my focus now for the next while. I want to pin down Savile's connection with these murders, and I want to put either a video, a film out there, or a book, or maybe both, showing that Savile was a serial killer who was basically on His Majesty's not-so-secret service.
Well, of course, I think I remember reading that they actually tested Savile for his dental records for bite marks on one of the bodies.
Yes, he was also they did. And he had bridge work done around the same time to change his teeth. Another thing was that he was a secretor, and there was a suspicion, particularly among the South Yorkshire police, that there were two killers involved, and one of them was a secretor, meaning that blood was passed through urine or ejaculation, and Sutcliffe wasn't, but Savile was, and the proof for me with Savile was that he wore the same pair of underpants all the time and used to wash them at the end of the day every night. This is also why he chose to live in caravans and not stay in hotel rooms where maids could see the bloodstains and so forth. If Savile is not a suspect in the Yorkshire Ripper killings, well, they were really Yorkshire and Lancashire. They even called them that. It would amaze me, but I do believe that he was at least complicit in the murder of Irene Richardson in the back of Savile's flat in Leeds.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've not read up on this because I've been kind of busy, but the police were exposed in the media for having this cover up going on basically, and Savile talking to his high-ranking police officers and just getting away with murder literally and getting to do what he wanted.
Yep.
And
taunting the public and taunting the police, playing songs dedicating them to the police on his radio show, like Andrew Gold's "Thank You for Being a Friend." A typical. Now, what I'm doing with this profiling is I'm using everything I've learned about psychopaths to apply the profiling method onto Savile. Okay, Savile was obviously a psychopath. There's no doubt about that. Even Bill Oddie referred to him as not being a human being. At the same time, too, there are two kinds of psychopaths. There's the overwhelming majority of psychopaths who are non-violent. I mean, non-physically violent. And then there's the psychopaths who are violent, which we call the serial killers or the sex killers. These would be the Ted Bundys of this world and so forth. And Peter Sutcliffe, let's not forget that too. But I believe that Savile was part of a ring within the elite that maybe extended into the higher levels of the BBC, where actually they were killing and getting away with it because these psychopaths basically had no control upon themselves, imposed upon them through law enforcement. Now, there's so many things about it that are so spooky in terms of behaviour. There was a bogus tape sent and a bogus letter sent from Sunderland, which a guy years later called Wearside Jack confessed to. I don't believe that was his stuff. I believe that he was an attention-seeking psychopath himself who learned to mimic the handwriting on the letter and also mimic the voice on the tape. I believe Savile actually did that. In fact, Yallop in his book Deliver Us from Evil claims that the murders that were unsolved murders, or the murders that couldn't be fully attributed to Sutcliffe, were probably attributed to the person who sent this tape. Now, if it wasn't Wearside Jack, and I'm not convinced it was, Scarborough is only down the road from Sunderland, where the guy lived. It's basically just a road up the east coast there, and he could have mailed it from there. I believe that Savile was playing games with the police. I believe the police were actually playing games with the public too, and one of them was the notorious tape that was sent by this guy called Jack the Ripper, Wearside Jack, which, even if it wasn't Savile, and there are parts where it absolutely does sound like Savile trying to put on a Geordie kind of accent, you can clearly hear that the police wanted to use this tape as a psyop and saying so much. Did you know all over Yorkshire and Lancashire, that tape was blasted non-stop all the time? Factories, when people were on the lunch break, the tape was played. It was played on the radio. It was played from loudspeakers on the streets. It was a huge social experiment to put people in Manchester, Halifax, Huddersfield, Leeds, in states of absolute terror of this serial killer, whom they knew was probably Jimmy Savile, who were creating a kind of a media circus. On top of that, what makes it even more sick and horrific is the fact that they flooded cities and towns in Yorkshire with radical feminist groups from London who went up there and radicalized women in a state of paranoia and told them that your husbands and your boyfriends are all the Ripper. And vast numbers of men were pulled in off the street with no evidence, basically on the fact that their girlfriend didn't like them anymore. They would say he was the Ripper. It was incredible. It was an enormous psyop that they used this Wearside Jack tape, which I don't believe was Wearside Jack, in order to control, in a state of absolute fear, people living in Lancashire and Yorkshire in the mid-1970s. And I think they used the whole Savile thing, the whole Sutcliffe thing, and the whole event around the murders from a new form of social engineering based on fear. And it's been with us ever since. I believe the actual fear control system that came from the Thatcher years on was developed within the Yorkshire Ripper thing at the time. So we're dealing with something that was not only sick and twisted, and an insight to how sick and twisted the psychopathic control grid is, but they also implemented their new forms of social control, their fear-based social control, division of men and women, division of families, nobody able to relax, criminals, murderers, rapists everywhere. And they did it deliberately, and it was part of the policing system where they were actually going from policing the streets, because you don't see coppers on the streets anymore, to ourselves in our own communities policing our own consciousness.
Well, it's almost 1984, isn't it? The Neighbourhood Watch. I wonder if Savile ever played that tape on his own programme. Do you know if he did?
Well, we don't know. There was that's a good question. I mean, he had the audience. Now, he was a national radio station. That would be a very interesting one to speculate. What I've been trying to find out is a database of Top of the Pops appearances, where he was the host of Top of the Pops, on what nights he was not accountable on the same nights as the murders. Now, Sutcliffe often said something that he heard the voice of God while he was driving around in his car, giving him orders. I believe that Savile, through his radio show, now that you mentioned that, was actually giving Sutcliffe orders through kind of codes. This happens with serial killer teams. This has been recorded a few times. Maura Hindley was dropping codes for many years later to, what was his name, Brady, the Moors murderers, through interviews in newspapers and so forth. And these codes were given back and forth. And it was almost like these psychopaths developed a sexual titillation or thrill from it. The fact that one of the Moors murderers' bodies was never found was used by Maura Hindley for decades after they were both arrested to give sexual pleasure to Brady, because they would play games back and forth like she was teasing him, like she was going to tell people where the body was missing, was buried, and he knew it wouldn't happen. So it was like this is how psychopathic minds work. And I believe the same thing was going on in a kind of a twisted homoerotic psychopathic serial killer sense between Sutcliffe and Savile, using the radio. And more tellingly, I believe that probably the people at the BBC, the BBC, big shots, knew these kinds of things were going on, and it was an inside joke as well. Because if they're willing to allow Savile to molest, hundreds of children openly inside the halls of Shepherd's Bush in the BBC, they won't stop at anything. And Savile was bringing the money in. It's never been fully understood why Savile was such a superstar. He was not a likable person. He had the creep factor times a million, and yet he was never off the BBC ever.
No, and he was always doing his charity work, as he liked to call it. And his TV, Jim will fix it, and it makes you wonder, if you look back at the Jim will fix it, how many children are sitting on his knee and all that kind of stuff. It's quite sickening, really.
And another thing that the Jim will fix it is, a lot of those stories, if you look at them now, they're stupid. Even as a kid, I thought they were stupid. What 8-year-old child wants to meet the Chancellor of the Exchequer? What 10-year-old child wants to meet Margaret Thatcher? I believe, and if you look at, you find that these children who wanted to meet these politicians were actually from acting schools, and the whole thing had been set up between Savile and the politicians to make the politicians look human on TV by pretending that kids cared about them. So the show was actually serving the political class and the political system, which is why they cut Savile so much. Savile, in one of his later interviews, said that he wasn't clever, he was tricky, and he said if you're tricky, you can get away with anything, and that's exactly how a psychopath thinks.
Yeah, I think if an 8-year-old actually asked to meet the Chancellor of Exchequer in the UK now, it's probably to give him some lessons on the economy, because the one over here doesn't know what he's doing. Probably give him an abacus and say, "Come on, George, work it out." But anyway, you talk about the whole Savile thing, and the tape and stuff being used as a psyop on the public, basically. What do you think the exposure of it in the media since last year? Do you think that whole thing's a psyop as well, and the ulterior motive is to bring about the normalisation of paedophilia?
Yes, I absolutely do believe that's true.
Yeah, there was a barrister. Sorry, there was a barrister over here actually came out with a statement saying that we should kind of forget about the Jimmy Savile thing and stop going after old men and just lower the age of consent.
Yep, and the London School of Economics issued a report at last weekend, which was actually read out by Theresa May, who is the Home Secretary, where they said that basically paedophiles should be allowed to adopt children and to take children off paedophiles or to restrict them. I'm not joking. This was in the Telegraph last Sunday, and if paedophiles are not allowed to adopt children, it's against their human rights. This is a staggering stuff. Yes, I too believe this is the normalization. You see, what we're dealing with is an elite who long to go back to the days of Greece when you had the symposia where all these people sat around and spoke about these men, actually, not people, men. Middle-aged men would sit around in their togas discussing political and economic philosophy while they were pleasured by 8- and 9-year-old boys. Well, they actually want to go back to that. They look at these and they say that was the height of civilization. The Greeks did this. We should be allowed to do this too. When Jonathan King was arrested and locked up in prison about 15 years ago for paedophilia, another BBC One DJ, he said that in years to come he would be seen as Oscar Wilde is now seen, as a hero, as someone who was ahead of the evolutionary curve. These are the kind of people we're dealing with. They're obsessed with getting at children. I don't know what it is. Maybe there's some truth to the whole thing David Icke says that they harvest a certain energy from it. I just don't know. I just don't know why they're obsessed with getting at children. But right now, particularly in the UK, you can see in the wake of the Savile thing, there is a psychotic frenzy. And that's what it is among the ruling classes, to open the floodgates and allow themselves to openly attack children sexually.
Oh, absolutely. And of course, it was I think it was Harriet Harman who came out with when she was working for Liberty, I think it was, or one of those organisations, or the Paedophile Information Network, or one of them, PI. Yeah, I can't remember the exact name, but she was talking about taking pornographic images of children is fine, as long as the children aren't harmed. Well, who's to say the children aren't harmed by being made to stand naked and commit pornographic acts for somebody else, for some adult's pleasure? I mean, this is the kind of people who are running the country, and they're coming out with statements like that. I mean, if that was you and I walking down the street and going into a local MP and saying, you know what, Mr. So-and-so, it is, I've just got some images here of me children in the bath playing with some sexual aids. What do you think of them? You'd be locked up within 5 minutes. Politicians are. Yeah. Politicians
it's the modern version.
Yeah.
It's the modern version of let them eat cake.
Yeah.
Let them eat cake. It's a modern version of that, taken on a sort of a psychosexual level. But that's what it is. We have a political class who are just like the Orwellian inner party, who are not subject to the actual same laws, statutes, rules, moralities, and even behavioural constraints that the rest of us are via, social policy. They exist outside it. We are the pros. They are the Orwellian inner party members, and they have privileges and access, and that's how they see themselves. They see themselves as an elite caste. And the fact you have people like Professor Peter Dutton, an evolutionary psychologist, whatever the hell that is, from University College London, writing a book called The Wisdom of Psychopaths, to normalize psychopathology by telling us that it's badly needed. It's in the halls of power for a reason, because the psychopath is the evolutionary next stage in human beings. This is how crazy our control structure is, and this is how out of control the leadership is. The division between the human race and the psychopaths at the top is a chasm now that if you cannot see it, there's something fundamentally wrong with your cognitive processing.
Well, I think there's something wrong with a lot of people's cognitive processing, because, as you say, it is getting more and more obvious as time goes on. I mean, not just in terms of the different, the gap between those at the top being the psychopaths, if you like, and the rest of us down below, but just in the stuff that goes on, the decisions that are made, the nonsense they come out with on the radio broadcasts, the TV broadcasts to justify war and all the rest of it. And it's getting more and more in your face, and yet, the majority of people are still sitting back and thinking, well, it'll be all right tomorrow. I've still got some money in my pocket. The beer's still cheap, and it just exasperates me, really. I mean, it's so in front of your face now that everybody should be able to see it. I don't know what's been done to people.
Well, it's just like Orwell said in 1984, that beer and football filled up the horizons of their minds. That's really what's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll go to another piece of music, and we'll chat about something else after the break. This is Echo and the Bunnymen, and possibly quite appropriately, the Killing Moon. Welcome back to Reality Bytes Radio with Thomas Sheridan on the 24th of October 2013. Again, we're talking off the break there. Just we were discussing the newspapers at first, and we went on to Russell Brand. Just a brief thing about the newspapers. I mean, over the past few months, 4 or 5 months, whatever, it's become apparent that the mainstream tabloids and the broadsheets are seemingly, identical nowadays. They all have 3 or 4 headline stories, all saying exactly the same thing, and the rest of the papers, whether it's a hard copy or online, are just full of trivia, absolute trivia, and it's just senseless stories. We had Yetis a couple of weeks ago, and it's just rubbish like that, and it says a lot about people that are still buying this stuff off the shelves. I don't know what you want to make of that, Thomas, but I just think it's hard to read one of these papers now, because it's just rubbish.
I find the broadsheets, they've also transformed. Now, the broadsheets in the past were always sort of like, the thinking man's newspaper, that kind of thing. But ultimately, they were just editorials. I used to remember reading the New York Times, and I saw, especially the Guardian is really bad for this, and the Irish Times, is that they did not actually report anything. Everything was written in the form of an editorial. So if they were reporting on, a house went on fire, they would say something like, today a house went on fire in Boston due to climate change. That kind of a thing. There was always the spin towards whatever the common purpose London School of Economics Baby and Society agenda was. But even now, the broadsheets are not doing that. I'm seeing more and more and more stories in the broadsheets surrounding celebrities. And they'll use some kind of sanctimonious platitudes surrounding celebrities in order to justify them, to get them in the papers. Whereas Sinead O'Connor, having a go at Miley Cyrus, they'll put her in the paper. Or if it's Russell Brand, the latest sort of like Pied Piper, they put him in the paper. It's all about any excuse to put a footballer, a celebrity, or any kind of person like that in the paper. It's bread and circuses, but it's bread and circuses in a very kind of clandestine manner.
Yeah, I suppose we've got the similarity between bread and circuses. We've got experts and celebrities. You've got the experts for everybody's to believe an expert, and the celebrity, well, everybody's to follow a celebrity. We've got these people are put on this pedestal for some supposed talent, I mean, I don't see any talent that Russell Brand's got except for growing hair, apparently. I mean, that's about it. There's certainly nothing intelligent comes out of him. I don't know, he's supposedly a comedian, or I don't know what he is. I've never found him funny. But yeah, look at your website here. He's shaking the hands with the Queen. It's nice. It's quite a funny handshake he's given her there, actually. But
have you noticed that? Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that handshake before. Yeah, and this guy's been into the drug scene and all the rest of it, and there he is meeting the supposed head of state, big smile on her face, looking at a junkie. I mean, what's that about? Maybe she's thanking one of our customers, I suppose. Thanks for your business. Yeah.
Well, can I read this article out to your listeners just to show where I stand on this guy? Okay, the title of the article was that, a reason I wrote this is because I was seeing all over my Facebook wall and all over the so-called alternative media, people going on about Russell Brand's appearance on the Paxman show and a few other things he's done recently as somehow proof that he's like some kind of counterculture, alternative guy within the media, in the mainstream. And they're literally, they're literally going bonkers posting this guy's videos as if he's some kind of messiah. And that's an interesting thing, because I want to read this article I wrote today. It's just a very short one. I only posted this about 2 hours ago, and it's already the second most read article on the history of my blog, which shows you the power of celebrity. And that's, I'm not bothered. I'm glad that people are finding my blog. But within a couple of hours, it's now more read than just every article on my blog, just because Russell Brand's name is on it. And the article is called "Russell Brand Isn't Waking People Up, He's Putting You Back to Sleep." It always amazes me how so many people who consider themselves to be awake still consider their beliefs being stated on the mainstream by a celebrity as being a higher accolade validation than any other outlet, research, or even their own convictions. Russell Brand is a pseudo-intellectual, overpaid, middle-class media lovey who's put out there by the BBC and The Guardian to make you forget all about Jimmy Savile and to quell your anger in a delusional state that he is waking others up. Russell Brand is put on the TV screens to placate the ones already awake and to put you back to sleep in the belief that it is some kind of victory. It isn't. It's showbiz being used as a social engineering tool yet again. You do not need the BBC or Russell Brand to validate your convictions if you genuinely feel that strongly about them. The truth is already self-evident. No mainstream media, political or celebrity validation is required. The Jimmy Savile horror show is the ultimate weapon we have in our arsenal, which we can wake people up with. The BBC knows this, and so do their owners and personal friends of Jimmy Savile, the royal family. So they throw you a truth bone, quote unquote, in the form of a celebrity platitude prosaic performance in the guise of Russell Brand talking about revolution when in reality it's about distraction. Do not be bought off with this rubbish. Keep the Jimmy Savile anger raging. It is the key to bringing the whole pyramid down. Russell Brand's image is also very Christ-like, and this is still a very powerful archetype people are wooed by. The Christ image was also utilized by the CIA creation Jim Morrison to act as another Pied Piper for the anti-Vietnam War generation in the late 1960s. This is the same tactic being used again. Forget your anger at the system. A celebrity will come along to fight a revolution for you on the telly. And that's exactly how I feel about it. It's one more externalization of your potential to say, I don't have to do anything. Russell Brand is talking about it on Newsnight.
Well, exactly. Yeah, it's you just abdicate your responsibility to these people, don't you? You're responsible to do something about it and to speak out about it, but you latch into this celebrity or expert, and you say, somebody's doing something, but I don't have to do anything. I'll continue. I'll go back to watch the football. Everything will be all right in the morning. I was just I said I was looking at his name. And I wonder if it's a three-barrel name and it should actually be Bertrand Russell Brand, a brand of Bertrand Russell. You know what I mean? Because I mean,
well, the way they're all related. You know who his grandfather is? Frank Spencer. Frank Spencer. What was that actor's name? Michael. I can't remember his name. On a TV show, some mothers do have him back in the 70s.
Crawford.
Michael Crawford. Apparently, someone told me today that that's his grandfather, and yet, so here's more proof that they're all related at some level.
Yeah, well, I mean, Michael Crawford went on to be the Phantom of the Opera, didn't he? As well, yep. I believe. Yeah, it's celebrities, but they go through kind of generations. I mean, this guy Brand, was it him that was involved with Jonathan Wass, as he likes to be called, over the remarks he made on television, or was that somebody else? I can't remember. And they were banned and all the rest of it, and hyped up. But he was all over the press for all the wrong reasons. And then he comes back. As you say, he's a messiah. He's risen from the dead, as it were, in his public image. And now he's back fighting the good fight for the ordinary people, you know. But I wonder how much he's got in his bank account. I bet he's not having to suffer austerity like the rest of the ordinary people he's supposed to be talking for. Other people like I've lost the guy's name. Doesn't matter. Yeah, but I mean, celebrities in general, they're trotted out repeatedly, like over the years. I mean, these people would be nobody if they were off the TV screens for 6 months. People would forget about them. Yeah. But they're continually regurgitated, and I'm sure somebody's making a bit of money off the back of it as well. Of course, I'm sure they'll go on to
Billy Bragg with his red socialist kind of thing. I mean, that guy. You know, that guy has been famous for years now, talking about socialism. You know, it's amazing. And it's like, who gives him the authority to actually get out there and talk about this stuff? Nobody. He's just by a band.
Yeah, and he's got socialism now, so there's nothing else to talk about, I suppose. That reminds me of a day up in Edinburgh. I was walking along Princess Street. I know you've been in Edinburgh, Thomas, haven't you? You go along to where not the Caledonian, the one at the Balmoral at the far end of Princess Street, and there's a statue there, sits outside registration house there, and socialist workers people always stand around there, handing out their well-funded newspaper with their well-funded banners, and I was walking by one day and the two of them were handing out the papers. I says, what are you protesting today, lads? They were, I'm a socialist worker. I says, well, you've got socialism. You may as well go home. I says, you've got Alex Salmond to run the country. What do you want? You know, and I was told to go away in no uncertain terms. But you know, it's quite pathetic.
Well, the SWP is just the SWP's purpose is to try and sabotage any kind of general or genuine counter revolutionary or activist movement. I'm absolutely convinced that this SWP is made up of two people. They're all rich. They're always rich to begin with, but they're all government spies or kind of unstable individuals who are very easy to whip up at protests, and will call somebody a rapist or a pervert or a racist at the drop of a hat. Their purpose is that. They're absolutely fanatics. The SWP are actually a cult, in my opinion, and there's so much to actually show that their methodology is cult-like. For instance, like you said, they stand at the end of Princess Street in Edinburgh, waving their flags and handing out their papers. Well, who else does that? Moonies, those kinds of organizations. They constantly are put into a state of repetitive learning of Trotskyite doctrine. So they're literally quizzed and constantly reading Trotskyite doctrine. And that's just like a cult where you have to read the same things over again. Indulge in confirmation bias, groupthink is everything. And finally, at all these Socialist Workers' Party demos, what do you have? The drummers going... That drumming is also to create hypnotic states, to actually put them in a state of mind control. The Socialist Workers' Party are a fanatical cult, political cult, using cult-type techniques in order to sabotage and destroy genuine activism within the countries that they're based in, particularly the UK and Ireland. I have never met a member of the Socialist Workers' Party that was actually from a working class background. Not a single one.
Sorry, I was trying to look something up online and socialist workers. My computer's frozen, but there you go. Is that a conspiracy? I don't know. Well, it's unfrozen now. No, it's not. They've got an appeal on the website, actually. It's Socialist Worker Appeal, Building the Fight Back, whatever that means. Help us raise £150,000.
Sell one of their stately homes, they'll be fine.
Yeah. And it's funny, they've got a logo at the side of that saying join the Socialist Workers' Party. And it's a clenched fist, but it's in a green circle. So there's your... there's your melon. Green on the outside, red on the inside. Yep. But they're also on board with the whole Grangemouth refinery dispute, as it's been called. But I've just been listening to that. I was listening to Radio 4 this morning, and I just think this is to do with the drive for independence. I think I can see Alex Salmond riding in on a big white horse and saving the day, and saying this is how good Scottish independence would be. Or they'll nationalise it or something and take it over and say, this is what we can do for Scotland. We can rebuild Scotland. Blah 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 blah. It's just the timing of it. It's just bizarre.
Well, the tragedy of Scotland, right? Like Ireland and Scotland both lost their freedom on the same day, 1801, to the Act of Union. We were both incorporated into the United Kingdom. Most of Ireland got its freedom in 1922 and enjoyed freedom until 1973 when we joined the European Union. At least Ireland had about 50 odd years of true sort of freedom. The tragedy of Scotland is that it's going to, the whole selling the whole thing in Scotland as we'll be like Ireland, we'll be free. But the reality is that Scotland will go straight into the European Union and won't have any freedom.
Yeah, the independence will last less than 24 hours, I believe.
The pardon.
Yeah, and I don't know why people don't get it. I mean, I used to, to my shame, actually campaign for Alex Salmond when I was young and stupid. And I was a great believer in the Scottish independence movement and all the rest of it. And, I kind of got disillusioned with it when I got holding some documents on Ravenscraig when they were shutting that down. Somebody who worked for the company who was assigned the commission to look into the clean-up that would be required. And I got a hold of those documents, and the place was so toxic, they were told that they couldn't build homes in it for a century or something like that. And, basically the conclusion of the report was that British Steel would have to excavate the whole area and then ship all this toxic waste off somewhere to even start cleaning it up, which of course they didn't want to pay for. And I had, I think it was Kenny McCaskill, I can't remember it, I think it was Kenny McCaskill, round my house picking up those documents, and that's the last I heard of it. And I thought, yeah, that's not right. So that was me finished with my SNP campaigning. But I mean, those same characters are still in power in Scotland today, and people believe they've got a choice in these so-called elections. They should be called elections, because all the people put up there have been selected for you to vote for it. So which millionaire do you want? And so I've said to friends up in Scotland, I said, you've had the same politicians in power since I was old enough to vote. That's 32 years. You've had the same people. How much money have they made out of this over all those years? How much, and what's happened? Nothing. The country's collapsing. All the industry's gone. All the shipbuilding's gone. All their utilities have been sold off to parasitical multinational corporations, all in the name of competition. And the only thing we've got is monopoly. There is no competition. One electricity company puts its price up by 10%, so does the other one. And people just can't see it. And as I say, I go back to what are they thinking? What are people thinking nowadays? You
talk about that corruption. I know. I live near the border here, so I meet people from Northern Ireland all the time. And they got their parliament or body, whatever you want to call it, their assembly, about 14 years ago now, 13 years ago, and it's a big gravy train. One woman was telling me that in her constituency, the Sinn Féin guy, who's actually the MLA member there, which is the nearest thing they have to a PM, a politician, a representative politician, has put basically his whole family on the public trough. So his daughter works at some kind of research. His wife got a job in the civil service. And the local newspaper showed that this one family, due to this guy for Sinn Féin getting elected, are taking in something like £700,000 in combined salaries and expenses every single year. And there's still no more democracy than when they had direct rule from London.
No, and that what's it, the Northern Irish Assembly, I think it's called. It was shut down.
Northern Ireland. Yeah, the Northern Irish Assembly. Yeah.
Yeah, it was shut down for years, and they were still taking their salaries, I believe.
Yeah, and they were based. At one point, the Irish government was running it, and the unionists were perfectly happy to not complain once they were getting paid. So it shows that none of them have any convictions.
No, or ideology or ethics at all. I mean, if somebody turned around to me and said, "I'll pay you, just shut up and do it." I mean, for one thing, you'd be bored out your tree. Really, you'd sit at home and do nothing. Make out you're actually trying to get this thing back on the rails and stuff, which you're obviously not, because you've no interest in it. Because as you say, you're only in it for the money. So it's easier not to have to do it than actually stand up there and pretend you're doing it, I suppose.
Well, a few months ago, I ambushed Jeffrey Donaldson of the DUP, the Democratic. I didn't literally ambush him. He was at an event I was at, and I ran up and got talking about the fracking. He hadn't got a clue, or didn't even know what fracking was, and yet they were fracking just across the border from his constituency. And his constituency, a big industry there, fishing, salmon and trout fishing, tourism and boating, stuff like that. And here was, across the border, a fracking machines like wrecking the water supply. And he hadn't got not only had he not got a clue what fracking was, and genuinely hadn't got a clue, how about the look on his face, but his mentality was that the poison would stop at the water at the border. You understand what I'm saying? It wasn't like as if the Republican, as the Free State, or whatever you want to call it down here, Irish Republican contaminated water would literally stop at the border.
Yeah, they could only do that with fluoride. Yeah, they could only do that with the fluoride. Yeah. No, I've got my own kind of thing on fracking. I think, whatever way it goes, whether it's fracking, the contaminated water, whatever they do in that kind of side of it, it's bad. Okay. If they leave the gas in the ground, it's bad, because people are freezing to death. And I was thinking, perhaps it's not as complicated as it's made out to be, and that's why they're pushing it towards big industry, so that it makes it look like the experts have to deal with it. Maybe it's just as simple as a guy going out, like in the first days of the oil industry, and putting a derrick up in his field and drilling a hole and getting this stuff. I don't know. It's gas.
With the oil, if they don't get the gas, if they don't find it, you still have this enormous environmental damage from these kind of slurry lakes they have to create. And it's like and who's paying for that? Well, the public is paying for that. The gas company and the oil companies are paying for it. I mean, on every level, it's madness. And it started with the wind turbines. The wind turbines, we were supposed to embrace them as wonderful things. Well, I know for a fact, I don't know how it is in Scotland or in England, but in the Republic of Ireland, the wind turbines were put into the most rural areas for the simple reason that they could rezone the planning laws in rural areas for industrial usage. And the industrial usage was the fracking machines. Everywhere the fracking machines are, there's already turbines there. It was a big scam that they had planned for decades.
Yeah, well, you're up in Sligo. I was down when I lived over there for 12 years. I was down in Roscommon. I mean, they were all, every hill had them on them there. And I actually painted somebody's house, a farmhouse, and there was a wind turbine literally about 200 metres from the house, and you could hear this thing inside the house, the noise of it, and I don't know how these people could live there.
I know. Well, they flooded them, and they kick up a hell of a racket. They put them in where you were living in Roscommon, in North Roscommon, and on the Leitrim border. And up there, they knew there was gas there, and they knew, because that's where all the coal mines used to be before they shut them down. And there's still coal down there, by the way, but they just shut them down because
up in
Arigna. Yeah, in Arigna, there's still coal down there, and that's where they put all the turbines on those hills around Keju and Plate. Beautiful, picturesque area. For the simple reason that they knew the fracking machines were eventually going to move in there.
Yeah, I mean, you can go up to Arigna and still actually get some coal. The miners, the ex-miners, started up a tour company there, so you actually go down the mine on the trolleys and do a tour of the mines. There's plenty of coal down there.
It's just like what they did in Scotland and Wales. They shut them, and the north of England, they shut them down so they could make more profit importing coal from Poland.
Yeah, and I think one report I read, there was at least 300 years worth of coal still under the ground in Britain, and here we are closing power stations, and because of global warming, supposedly, and we've got pensioners freezing to death, and the fact that they've closed more coal power plants this year means that more people are going to freeze to death next year. So somewhere along the line, the people that have made that decision are complicit in the murder of those people, in my opinion, because they know the consequences of their actions.
Well. And I don't know how it is in England, but they've outlawed the burning of coal in a lot of Irish urban areas. So you can't actually have coal, and coal is the thing that really does whack up the heat, in terms of solid fuel. And yet they banned it in urban areas. So the whole thing is a scam to get people on utilities. And if they can't afford them, well, tough luck.
Yeah, I mean, in Bulgaria, everybody burns wood and coal. Some of the cities are quite smoggy, but not as bad as they make out. But all the villages there, they all burn wood all through the winter and coal. You drive around there, you can't see where a tree's being cut down anywhere. It's so well managed. They talk about the environment, and you can't burn wood because of the environment. Well, over there, they've been doing it for thousands of years, and you still can't see where the trees are being cut down. So it's doable.
Yeah.
Totally
doable. Totally doable. And they know it. That's how it was in these islands as well. When we had deciduous woods, that they were like managed in such a way that one tall like oak or ash or some kind of tree like that produces an enormous amount of fuel. And yet they don't. It's not exploited. The trees in the commercial forests are used for making paper.
Yeah, well, when I was at school way back in the day, I left in 1979, I was told around about 1974, 75 that within 10 years it'd be a paperless society. So
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, I look at all the computers now and all the paper they're generating, and you wonder, before computers, we used far less paper than we use now. Without a doubt. So we're supposedly trying to save the planet by protecting the rainforests and all the rest of it, yet we're still prepared to cut down trees and make paper out of them.
And you look at these companies that make paper, like what you call it, I forget, the Smurf in Ireland, and there's like Louisiana Pacific in America. These are enormous companies with massive profits, and all they do is make really paper, computer paper.
Yeah.
In the so-called paperless society.
Yeah. I saw something in the Irish Independent today I wanted to talk to you about. It was Ming Flanagan. He's up around you, isn't he? Donegal or Roscommon?
No, he's on the border of Roscommon and Leitrim, closer to where you were.
Yeah. I think I met him once before he started with a shirt and tie, and back then he was talking about legalising marijuana and stuff. And now he's in the papers today pushing for it and saying it could save the country €300 million annually. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I actually quite like Ming. I think he is sincere. I think the fact that he gives half his salary away to his social projects and stuff in his community, I quite like that about him. I think he is a sincere guy. The whole thing with the legalization of marijuana, to me, that's just another carrot they hold out to people. I don't think it's healthy that people, they associate marijuana legalization with freedom. Like, as someone recently said to me on my Facebook page, they might as well be living on a psych ward. Access to drugs does not equal freedom. And for a lot of people today, particularly people who are obsessed with, marijuana and whatever, those kinds of drugs, they associate access to that and freedom. Now, I know there's all sorts of things that cannabis can be used in the treatment of various cancers, and that's all wonderful stuff, and that should be put out there as access. And I don't care. I'm an anarchist. I believe that if people want to inject themselves with cooking oil, that's their own business. I think that all drugs should be legal anyway, and that's the end of it. Once put the drug dealers and then the drug traffickers and the CIA out of business. But I think this is just another ruse to make it sound like it means something. We could start a marijuana business in Ireland because apparently I don't smoke any of that stuff myself, but apparently it grows very, very well here, from what I've been told. And it's just one more meaningless policy, if you ask me, at the end of the day.
Yeah, I just mentioned it because you meet so many people in the so-called truth movement who are knocking this stuff back on the hour, every hour kind of thing.
Oh yeah,
And I think, how are you supposed to keep a straight head and think things through and stuff like that? It's like me having a pint of beer every hour and then trying to be coherent. It doesn't work, and
if I'm taking on psychopaths, I want to be lucid and coherent. I don't want to be like,
out of it,
either drunk or stoned, or medicated. Yeah. And then so many of them are against, like, they post links to things about like overprescription of medication, and then, like as you said, so many of them in this movement, they're skinning up constantly.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I met a couple recently, and they're really, they're quite focused on the subjects that they want to research and stuff. But half the time you phone them up, and they're basically incoherent. You can't get
I know that happened the other night with somebody.
Yeah.
It's depressing, actually.
Yeah, and it's unfortunately the perception of how should we say, ordinary people would be that people who are trying to get the truth out to what's going on are kind of associated with that as well, and we're all kind of free love, dope smoking hippies. And it does us no favours. But
anyway. that's how the CIA quelled the Vietnam War, anti-Vietnam War movement, and also the Black Panthers. It's the same thing. It's just like what was his name? Aldous Huxley said the scientific society would be to keep them medicated so they would love their slavery. Yeah.
People would come to love their servitude in a situation where they normally wouldn't. Something like that. We'll go to another piece of music and then we'll come back to the last 15 minutes or so, and we'll end it for 10 o'clock. Welcome back to Reality Bytes Radio, last 15 minutes or so. So we've got Thomas here, Thomas Sheridan, talking about, all sorts of stuff. His website's thomassheridanarts.com, and he has recently started a news radio broadcast on Sunday evenings, I believe, between 7 and 9. Do you want to tell us why you got into the old broadcast media, Thomas, and what your show is about?
Well, people have been asking me for a long time to do a show, and I didn't have the confidence. In fact, the first time I was ever asked was the last time I met you, when we were in Dunstable there, like last summer, 2 summers ago.
Yeah.
And someone had come up to me then and asked me, to do a radio show after I did a presentation. And I was like, I don't know anything about radio, blah, blah, blah at all. And, but the idea did kind of appeal to me the more I thought about it. But anytime I spoke to people about doing it, it just seemed kind of complicated. I didn't want to deal with producing my own show or doing a console or anything. And then Type 1 Radio, which are a bunch of guys down in Brighton in England, I went over and did a talk in Zeus Studios there I think it was back in the summer or the spring this year. And I got to know them, and they were really nice. And I've been on their shows a few times, and I met some of them in other places too. And they had some slots open, and they were going to produce them. So anyone who'd gone on that network would just have to literally talk into the microphone. And so, I definitely did it. I said, I'll definitely do it. So the show is the #1 show on the network now in no time. It's really doing well for me. And it's on Sunday nights between 7 to 9 GMT. Whatever that is in the rest of the world. That's 7 to 9 British and Irish time. And the idea was I wanted to do a show where I could actually do things like what you do, read the news, but also inject a bit of humor into it and play music by unsigned bands, talk about the arts, all under the umbrella of what you call the alternative or the truth movement, without being too dark or anything like that, to show that life does go on, that even if we live in a world that's run by psychopaths, there's still art and music and comedy that's still going to despite them and still being created. And that was a big thing for me to help unsigned bands. And that's been the best part. One of the best parts of the shows for me is I've been able to do that. I've been able to like get people out there to get a decent sized listenership for their records and stuff like that. Because the music industry is essentially dead in terms of like helping anyone with talent. So I've been doing that. I'm to episode 15 now, so it's been 15 weeks doing that. Will be next one. I'm doing a repeat show next week because I'm doing something else. But I've done 14 live broadcasts, and I have to say I've been absolutely loving it. I've been really enjoying myself. The freedom of not having to produce and just having a few producers there to do it all for me is a great thing. Also, it's allowed me to people to talk about things I don't normally talk about, and also had some great guests. I brought in Joe Atwell and Ryan Gilmore, who wrote a book saying that, that talks about how the Romans actually stole the Jesus story and used it for their own political ends and things like that. And that got very good ratings. And, we had like a really good discussion on history, particularly around the Flavian emperors at the time in Rome after the Christian era, and how they manipulated public perception, and how similar it is to today. It is still the same ideas that they create mythologies, or they take real stories. I actually believe that Jesus' story is real, that it was actually co-opted by the Roman imperialist structure. And we've had discussions like that. I've had a great guy on from Glasgow, Adam, from up there, and we've actually done a couple of programs on how to identify, shills and molds within the truth movement based on our experiences. And we've all had them. I know you've had them, of how these people look, how they dress, how they function online, and that's done very well for us. And then there's other things. We talked about psychology. A lot of the people who would like, say, Alan Watts' program would probably like mine as well, in the sense that it deals with a very similar way, but I broaden it up to a bit more entertainment, and probably not as negative as Mr. Watts' show can be at times. So I wanted to create like a good Sunday night show that people would listen to, and I really thought it would flop after a week or two, but apparently it's just going from strength to strength, and I'm absolutely delighted. The name of the show is The Velocity of Now. And that was actually named after the theme music, which I composed myself. And then I decided that'd be a good name for the show. And the website is vonradio.net, fonradio.net. And you can also get the link through my regular website, thomassheridanarts.com. So I have to say, it's been great fun. It's something I didn't think I would be able to do, or it was something that I thought I'd be very intimidated by. But now I actually quite look forward to sitting in front of the mic every Sunday night, because it's actually allowed me to broaden my own personal horizons as well.
Yeah, I think it's from my own point of view. I think it's good when you get guests on and you get a totally different perspective on something that you thought you had a kind of a clue about, and they'll take you off on a tangent. And you go, oh yeah, well, that's, I need to look into that or have a think about that. You mentioned Alan Watt there. He's actually stopped his radio broadcast now from Monday to Fridays. He's only doing blurbs and some interviews now, and we're going to have him on the 21st of November. On Reality Bytes.
I'd like to interview him as well. I really do enjoy his work.
Yeah,
I'm not surprised he gave that up. It was a hell of a schedule he was doing.
Yeah, well, they asked him to do a weekend slot, and he's kind of said, I won't know. But I can put you in touch. Put it that way. I've got his number.
Yeah, I definitely would like to meet and talk with him. He's a very interesting man, and he's been a big influence on me.
Yeah. Well, and myself. Yeah, and myself. Another thing I picked up on when I listened to your show a few weeks ago there on the signing of the new bands, and you were very clear and specific on the format that they had to send it to you. So I mean, if anybody's listening to this now and wants to send you stuff, who's in a new band, there's a specific format they had to send the music in, I believe.
Yeah, it has to be a decent quality recording, because I want the bands to like their songs and their talent to shine. So none of this recorded with a Zoom recorder or a digital recorder. I want proper, good recording. It's cheap and affordable to make decent recordings these days, so it's not a big problem. But under 5 minutes, either a WAV or an MP3 file. It's really, these are demands really put out there by the producer more than anything else. And also a good quality sound taken off a YouTube clip. We're actually building a phenomenal archive of music of unsigned or indie bands or own label bands, and I'm very proud of it. And I want the quality and the standard to be like that. And I'm not bothered by any genre. We've had reggae, we've had folk, we've had jazz, we've had hardcore, we've had speed metal, you name it. We've had dance music, we've had trance, chill out, anything. Once it comes from the heart. I'm not a musical snob, and I'm willing to open the door to anybody. And so it's like, once it's a decent recording, once it's the tune sounds good, and once it's under 5 minutes long and in an MP3 or WAV format, then you're on. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, good stuff. Because as you say, the music industry is it's all about celebrity status and what you wear, what you do, what kind of shampoo you use and all the rest of it. And the new bands, there's a lot of them out there, and a lot of good music out there that needs to be broadcast, and then people can make up their own mind about it instead of having all the hype from the likes of Jimmy Savile, for example, on top of the pops.
Exactly, and also the music industry and the publishing industry has been completely bypassed by people who make their own records and their own books now. And it's now, and we in the alternative media should do the same. We should be replacing the mainstream media with this.
Well, absolutely, and that goes for, well, we're doing it now with the radio.
Yep.
The more people that broadcast, the wider range of interests that will be broadcast, and the wider audience that can be reached. And to get them away from the drivel that's on radio. I mean, I tune in very occasionally just to see what they're talking about, and it's stuff that when I was young, you would have listened to and thought it was then for children. But these are adults talking about your favourite colour of socks or something, and I just I can't even understand how that person in that radio station can be sitting there naturally talking such garbage for like an hour.
That's all adolescence. The adolescence, the infantilism that goes on forever, the adolescence that never ends. Sure, if you look at YouTube, you get an insight into what these kinds of things are like. This one DJ has a competition to see who could find the item of food in their fridge, which is the longest part of the sell-by date. And people are going crazy about it. This is a grown adult playing a children's game, and other adults playing along with them.
Yeah, and they encourage people to call in on their 0800 numbers and to pay their wages, basically.
And people, salaries,
yeah, it's just I find it quite bizarre. And I suppose I was down at my parents down in Devon there a few months ago, and they're obsessed with watching quiz shows. I sit there and I look at it, and they'll be shouting out the answers and all that kind of stuff. But the actual quality of the quiz, in inverted commas, is so low in the intellectual level that I wonder where people's brains are. They're shouting out answers. And they're shouting out answers to really simple questions, and then by implication, then they're somehow intelligent.
Yeah.
When it's the obvious answer.
I know, it's like a child would know it, and yet these game shows are absolutely non-stop. There's I don't have a TV, but I'm going to go down to the pub or something. There's I don't know, in this part of the world, in the UK and Ireland, there's something like 4 or 5 non-stop 24-hour quiz show channels.
Yeah. Well, even the ITN networks, so all the commercial channels. I mean, all afternoon, it's all you get. It's either you're renovating your house, or you're winning some kind of holiday in Bermuda or something. That's about it, and that's supposed to fill your intellectual void, I suppose, when you're retired and you just sit there and vegetate. But
and wait to die.
Yeah. Well, wait to die. The way it's going, you're not going to get a chance to wait, are you? They're just going to take you in and have their way with you. But I got somebody sent me a leaflet through the other day there, and it's basically the rebranding of the Liverpool Care Pathway, and I think it's called Planning for Your Future Care. And on the front cover of this thing, it's a nice little glossy leaflet, and they show you a nice blue sky full of white lines crisscrossing each other. and it's right on the front there, planning for your future care. Well, I mean, again, it's right in your face what they're planning. But people just don't see it.
Someone sent me a JPEG recently from the 1970s, late 1970s. Jimmy Savile on the cover of a book, and he was surrounded by children. And this was a real book, and it was a guidebook for carers and childminders. And there's Jimmy Savile on the cover.
Yeah, well, it's been going a long time, and they've been putting it in their face for a long time. But as we discussed earlier, it's getting so in your face now. Surely more people have got to start seeing it. But then again, they might not see it until the jackboot comes stamping down on their heads. Who knows? But it's what can you do? You can only keep doing your radio shows and getting the word out and trying your best.
Yeah, and if you can save your own backside and the people you care about, well, that's all you can really do at the end of the day. Some people are not ready to wake up, and that's okay as well. There's nothing you can do about that.
Yeah,
you're all mad trying to wake them up.
Yeah, well, yeah, and you'll drive yourself insane. I mean, if people don't want to wake up, and well, there's nothing.
You need that energy. You need that energy for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, thanks again, Thomas, for being on the broadcast, and I'm sure we'll have you on sometime in the future. Again, your own broadcast. What is there? They can get the link from your thomassheridanarts.com, can they? To your video.
Yeah, that's the main site for me, thomassheridanarts.com, and you can find links to all my radio shows, my books, anything there. I've got a beautiful 2013-14 calendar of my artwork out. So if you wanted to support me, you could buy a beautiful calendar of my artwork and have something all year long. That's really nice.
Okay, we'll finish off with an old band you've got a lot of time for, and something we talked about earlier, actually.